All right, let's dive into a world that is so small you can't see it, but it's powerful enough to create life-saving medicines. We're talking about mammalian cell cultures. You can think of them as microscopic powerhouses, these tiny, tiny factories that are literally fueling modern medicine, building everything from vaccines to the latest cancer treatments.
But here's the thing. What really goes on inside these tiny biological factories, and maybe more importantly, what happens when they get all clogged up with their own waste? Well, that is the central problem we're going to unpack today. What if a factory's biggest threat was its own garbage?
Okay, so to really get this, we need to imagine each individual cell as its own super sophisticated factory. It's got an intake process for raw materials, it uses energy to run all this complex machinery, and at the end of the line, it produces an incredibly valuable product. We're talking complex antibodies to fight diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, or even the key components for a brand new vaccine. Now, you know any factory runs on supplies, and of course, it produces waste. Well, in our cellular factory, we call all these little molecules metabolites. And they are pretty much everything. They're the raw materials coming in the door, they're the energy that's powering the whole assembly line, and as we're about to see, they're also the waste products that can pile up and cause some really serious problems. So let's meet the key players inside this factory, shall we? We're going to break them down into a few simple categories so we can really understand their roles, from the fuel coming in to the trash that needs to go out. This table lays it out just about perfectly. So first up, you've got your nutrients, things like glucose. These are the basic raw materials. Then you've got the factory's power source. It's energy, molecules like ATP, which are like tiny rechargeable batteries for every single process. But the really crucial part for our story is right there at the bottom, the byproducts. This is where our problem starts, with waste like lactate and ammonia. Let's keep moving and see how all this stuff connects. See, the factory's assembly lines, that's what we call metabolic pathways. These are just the specific chemical reactions that turn those raw materials into energy and, the final product. We're going to take a look at the two most important ones right now. First on the floor is glycolysis. Now you can think of this as the factory's express lane. It grabs glucose, breaks it down super, super fast, and spits out a little bit of energy. It's quick, but it's also kind of messy. The main thing it produces isn't just energy, it's a ton of lactate, our first problematic waste product. The second major assembly line is called glutaminolysis. It uses a different raw material, glutamine, and it is absolutely essential for feeding into the cell's main power plant. And while it does produce more energy, it's got a pretty significant downside. It creates ammonia, our second and even more toxic waste product. Now, both of these assembly lines, they feed into the cell's main engine room, which is called the TCA cycle. That's where the most efficient energy production happens. But the critical takeaway here is that you absolutely need these lines running to power the factory, but they both create pollution along the way. And that brings us right to the core crisis of our story. What happens when the factory is just producing waste way faster than it can be cleared out? The entire operation, it just starts to grind to a halt. The pollution literally begins to shut the factory down from the inside out. And this slide just perfectly illustrates our two main villains here. On one side, you've got lactate. It comes from using glucose, and it makes the cell's environment acidic. It's kind of like trying to work in a room that's slowly filling with smog. Everything just slows down. But on the other side is ammonia, and that's even worse. It is directly toxic. It poisons the cellular machinery and can even damage the very products that are being made. Just look at the numbers. The impact is staggering. In a healthy, clean factory, we get 100% productivity. But you introduce high levels of lactate, and bam, output drops by more than half. And with high ammonia, it's even more catastrophic. Productivity just plummets to 30%. It's like the entire workforce just walked off the job. So how in the world do you fix a problem like this? Well, this is where the scientists really step in and become the factory managers and engineers. They've developed some pretty incredible quality control and engineering strategies to keep this factory clean and running at peak performance. First things first, you need a good dashboard.
Scientists use a combination of real-time sensors to track things like glucose and lactate levels instantly, and then more detailed offline analysis for a much deeper look. These diagnostic systems give them a complete, live picture of the factory's health at any given moment.
And armed with all that data, they can start to implement some really clever control strategies. There's smart feeding, which is basically like a just-in-time delivery system, so you avoid oversupplying the raw materials and overwhelming the cells. They also develop better recipes, carefully tweaking the cell's food to be more efficient and produce less junk. They can even use efficiency boosters to fine-tune the assembly lines themselves, encouraging pathways that are cleaner and more productive. And really, this all comes back to one central idea, which is stated perfectly right here. Understanding these metabolites is critical for optimizing cell growth, productivity, and product quality. See, it's not just about making more, it's about making it better and doing it way more efficiently.
So the crucial point is this: by acting as these meticulous factory managers for these microscopic systems, we can totally transform them. We can take them from being these messy, inefficient workshops and turn them into clean, high-performance powerhouses, capable of producing the next generation of medicine